A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends, welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles. And A Course in What is a free weekly podcast that comes out each Tuesday. And if I have an announcement, I'm just going to make it at the top of each of these podcasts. And I have a couple announcements today. One is that the new Facebook page for A Course in What is up and running. It's at facebook.com/A Course in What. And there you can connect with other listeners and leave comments and ask questions and listen to the podcast as well. There's links for that. Also, I want to mention that I will be on Dr. Gary Penn's Blog Talk radio show on September 30th. And I think it's at 1 o'clock. It's either 1 or 2 Pacific time. And I believe that it's live. And that website is www.blogtalkradio.com/Dr. spelled out Gary, Gary Penn, Penn. If you're interested in listening, I'll probably be talking a lot about hypnosis and things like that because he is a psychotherapist. And you can check my website or either a Facebook page, A Course in What, or facebook.com/Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy, and I will have that updated information on there as well. And maybe by the next podcast, I will know exactly the time and I'll let you know. Okay, so thank you very much. And we're going to read this final section today and finish with chapter 2. So that's good news. We are on chapter 2, the separation and the atonement, section 8, the meaning of the last judgment. And he begins this chapter with the section, the origins of separation. And he ends the chapter with this section, the meaning of the last judgment. So it's interesting. He kind of bookends this chapter with the beginning, the origins of the separation, and the last judgment. It's a very well organized chapter in that sense. And this section from the title is obviously a correction on some level of our understanding of the last judgment because it's called the meaning of the last judgment. So having grown up in Western Christian culture, whether you went to church or not, that Christianity has infiltrated our thinking and society. And the last judgment, from my limited understanding, is that after the apocalypse and the world has ended in Armageddon, we then stand before God with our sins in our hand and find out our final destiny. And I think it might be part of Judaism too. But at any rate, he's going to turn all of that on its head. All of that meaning that we have associated with the last judgment. All right, so let's get into it. Paragraph 1, sentence 1. One of the ways in which you can correct the magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. So this chapter has talked a lot about confusion, how we confuse cause and effect, body, mind, and we've also talked about magic before. Magic is the opposite of the miracle, where the miracle uses forgiveness and love to heal the mind. Magic uses something in the world in order to heal. So magic involves using something outside of ourselves. The miracle is using our mind to heal the real cause of separation. And Jesus tells us that magical means aren't evil. In fact, they're necessary for us right now, where we are in our journey. But while we take the magical pill or whatever, we need to also recognize the real problem is the guilt of separation in our mind. So when he says that in order to correct any confusion about where real healing comes from, you need to remember that you didn't create yourself. Therefore, how can you know what you need in order to heal? If I was created by God, then my healing would come from God. It wouldn't come from outside of me. When we forget who we are, we do need magical means, like now. When we remember that we are innocent children of God, then we no longer have the belief of separation in our mind. And that then doesn't create this world or those experiences which then keep us asleep and keep us searching for the healing of that experience within the world. Sentence 2, you are apt to forget this when you become egocentric, and this puts you in a position where a belief in magic is virtually inevitable. So when you forget that you didn't create yourself, that's what this refers to. Becoming egocentric means when you forget who you are, when you listen to the ego in your mind, which tells you that separation is real and that you are a body born into suffering and made to die. And for sure, you need magical means then. You look to anything outside of yourself to cure that ill that's within. 3, your will to create was given you by your Creator, who was expressing the same will in His creation. So your will is to create love. That's the only thing that's real. Just as God extended love and created you or us, the one sonship, His creation. We too have that ability to create, just like our Father. 4, since creative ability rests in the mind, everything you create is necessarily a matter of will. That's the miracle to extend love, which is the opposite of magic. Magic is the miscreative use of the mind. So it's the opposite of creations. Therefore, the miracle is the creative use of the mind. It's using the mind as God intended us to use it, as He uses it, which is to extend love. 5, it also follows that whatever you alone make is real in your own sight, though not in the mind of God. Here again, he uses the word make in opposition to the word create. To create is an attribute of our right mind, and to make is of the ego or of the wrong mind. Everything that is eternal is created. Everything that's temporary is made. 6, this basic distinction leads directly into the real meaning of the last judgment. So if our sins are those things that we've made, again, sin is just another word of separation or misperception. Those things that we've made after the separation aren't real. If those sins aren't real, then how can we be judged by them? Paragraph 2. The last judgment is one of the most threatening ideas in your thinking. And I think this means that the idea that God is judging you is one of the most threatening ideas to your thinking. And really, that is the basis of this entire world. When we had the thought of separation, our only wrong choice was choosing to listen to the ego who told us that the separation was real and the world was real, and that if we returned home to God, He would punish us. And so the last judgment, and so as it says, the last judgment is one of the most threatening ideas in your thinking. The last judgment in terms of it being a judging God rather than a loving God. That thought alone is what is sustaining the world and separation. 2, this is because you do not understand it. So here he's telling us we got it all wrong. 3, judgment is not an attribute of God. So how can a God who knows only love judge? 4, it was brought into being only after the separation, when it became one of the many learning devices to be built into the overall plan. So it meaning judgment. So only after the separation did we make judgment. We then saw others and everything outside of ourselves, which is a prerequisite to judgment. You first have to see something as outside of you. And I think when he says judgment becoming a learning device, he means that everything the ego makes to keep us stuck in time and guilt and separation is reinterpreted by the Holy Spirit to bring us home. So these things are then learning devices. The body is now a learning device in which we learn our lessons. Time is a learning device. The world becomes a learning device, a classroom. Therefore, even judgment becomes a learning device because we learn to use judgment differently. We learn to judge against the ego. And I think when he says the overall plan, he's talking about the atonement plan, the plan in awakening. 5, just as the separation occurred over millions of years, the last judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps an even longer one. All right, so the world is billions of years old. So does that mean that the atonement or the last judgment will take that long? And here he's saying yes, and perhaps even longer. He talks more about what the last judgment is in the next two paragraphs. So we'll keep reading here. But he's warning us that this is a process. It's going to take a very long time. 6. Its length can, however, be greatly shortened by miracles, the device for shortening but not abolishing time. And as we've talked about before, the miracle is the tool we use to speed up time, to take that elevator up instead of the stairs to the top. And if you understand that guilt is the preserver of time, it sustains time and space, then it makes sense that the miracle which undoes guilt shortens time. 7. If a sufficient number become truly miracle-minded, this shortening process can be virtually immeasurable. So this reminds me of studies that they've done on transcendental meditation in towns where people practice TM regularly together, and it directly affected the community around them. In fact, crime rates went down when people meditated regularly. So there's obviously power in joined minds. There's a line in the Bible that says, "For where 2 or 3 have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst." So there's great strength in numbers, and he's saying here that if we continue to practice being miracle-minded in our own lives, that each of us who do this are contributing to this shortening process. 8. It is essential, however, that you free yourself from fear quickly, because you must emerge from the conflict if you are to bring peace to other minds. So this is interesting because he's not saying like take your time, you have all the time in the world. He's saying free yourself quickly. Get on with it. Emerge from the conflict in your mind that you are separated so that you can bring peace to other minds. You can heal the sonship. You can heal the world. Again, he's asking us to not waste time. Don't waste time on separation, on the ego, on fear. He needs us, as he has said before, to be his miracle workers. Paragraph 3, sentence 1. The last judgment is generally thought of as a procedure undertaken by God. So we talked about that, about how God judges us by how well we did on earth, separating out our good deeds from our bad deeds. 2, actually, it will be undertaken by my brothers with my help. So here he's turning it on its head and he's saying, actually, that's wrong. The last judgment is what we do in our minds. With Jesus as our teacher, we judge our thoughts and separate out the good thoughts from the bad thoughts. Then we make that final last judgment that we want to return home. 3, it is a final healing rather than a meting out of punishment, however much you may think that punishment is deserved. So the final healing is the final decision within our minds, within every brother's mind, to choose love over fear. And when Jesus says that we think that punishment is deserved, that's because we are still stuck in that ego thought system, which tells us that we're guilty and will be punished for separating from God. And that's underlying all fear and all anxiety. 4, punishment is a concept totally opposed to right-mindedness. And the aim of the last judgment is to restore right-mindedness to you. So he's saying, how can punishment be part of this plan? Punishment is part of wrong-mindedness. It's opposed to right-mindedness. God doesn't judge us, so there can be no punishment in the right mind. 5, the last judgment might be called a process of right evaluation, a process of right-minded evaluation. We look at our thoughts and decide which thoughts we keep and which thoughts we discard. 6, it simply means that everyone will finally come to understand what is worthy and what is not. So it's not people who are worthy or unworthy, or deeds that are worthy or unworthy, but rather thoughts that are worthy or unworthy. So you see, it's completely antithetical to the Christian idea of the Last Judgment. It's not God that's judging us, it's we that are judging our own thinking. 7. After this, the ability to choose can be directed rationally because there won't be any conflict in our mind. Our mind will be in an undivided state, as mentioned previously. 8. Until this distinction is made, however, the vacillations between free and imprisoned will cannot but continue. So until then, until we make that last judgment, we're going to continue to vacillate and keep our will free or imprisoned by the thoughts we choose to hold on to, love and fear. Paragraph 4, sentence 1. The first step toward freedom involves a sorting out of the false from the true. We have to do that sorting out process in our minds now, sorting out the thoughts in our mind that are loving and those that are seeped in guilt. And that's what the lessons of A Course in Miracles are for. The entire process of the Course is sorting out those thoughts. And quite frankly, the Course tells us in the lessons that we don't even know which thoughts are good thoughts and which thoughts are bad thoughts. We have to actually go through the lessons to have our mind healed in order for us to even begin the process of understanding which thoughts are good and which thoughts are bad, or worthy or unworthy, or healthy or unhealthy, or helpful or unhelpful, however you choose to see that. 2. This is a process of separation in the constructive sense and reflects the true meaning of the apocalypse. So the apocalypse is I don't know, I think it's like after Armageddon, which is the battle between good and evil. And I think that he's referring to that battle between good thoughts and bad thoughts, etc. That process of separating out, that's constructive and reflects the true meaning of that apocalypse. 3. Everyone will ultimately look upon his own creations and choose to preserve only what is good, just as God himself looked upon what he had created and knew that it was good. So, of course, in A Course in Miracles, it's not looking on the world or the physical body, God looking on those things and what he created and knew that it was good, because from A Course in Miracles perspective, none of that is real. That we as one son in his mind, it's sort of a metaphor of looking upon us as his son and recognizing that it is good. Creations is one of those words that's elusive. It refers to anything that is the result of the extension of love. So it doesn't mean anything again in the physical world. Creations are eternal. And we're beginning to sort through this process a little bit. When we choose the ego, we don't feel so good, and when we don't like the results, so we choose love the next time. And we're already beginning at the very early first step stages of this process of recognizing that when I choose my ego, I don't feel good. It doesn't give me the peace or the love or the abundance or whatever that is, or the health that I'm looking for. 4. At this point, the mind can begin to look with love on its own creations because of their worthiness. So again, he's saying at this point, the mind can begin. So it's obviously a process. All of these words are denoting a process in time. 5. At the same time, the mind will inevitably disown its miscreations, which without belief will no longer exist. The only reason that we continue to miscreate is because we believe in the ego and what our physical eyes tell us is real. And so eventually we'll disown those thoughts. You may remember that idea of when we elect one official, we reject the other. So he's saying here, at the same time, the mind will inevitably, when it chooses the worthy thoughts, disown its miscreations, its unworthy thoughts. They'll pale in comparison to love, and that's why we will disown them. Paragraph 5, sentence 1. The term "the last judgment" is frightening, not only because it has been projected onto God, but also because of the association of last with death. So we projected that idea onto God. We created this whole idea of the last judgment. It has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with God. It's all an ego idea to sustain the dream of guilt and separation and punishment. And when we separated, the ego made God that bad guy. We fear him so that we won't return to him. Death is also a projection of the ego thought system. There is no death in God. So it's doubly scary for us to have this idea of the last judgment. Sentence 2. This is an outstanding example of upside down perception. I love how he says it's an outstanding. Good job. You screwed that up so well. So once again, the ego turns everything upside down. That's why we need the Course to turn everything right side up. He's turning the last judgment right side up. But he's saying, wow, you did a really great job of turning that all upside down. Sentence 3. If the meaning of the last judgment is objectively examined, it is quite apparent that it is really the doorway to life. So he's saying it's not really the entry to hell, it's the doorway to life. 4. No one who lives in fear is really alive. Wow, that's quite a sentence. In fact, that sentence really stops me in my tracks. No one who lives in fear is really alive. So on some level, we're already dead because we're living in fear. I mean, who doesn't live in some fear? So he's saying, really, none of you are alive. None of you are living life with a capital L, the way that life was created for you to live. In fact, we don't even know what life is. We're so scared of death, but we haven't even lived. We're afraid of dying from a non-life, but it's a non-life. We've got it all, again, upside down. 5. Your own last judgment cannot be directed toward yourself because you are not your own creation. So we can't judge ourselves because we didn't create ourselves. We need to just let all of that judgment go. 6. You can, however, apply it meaningfully and at any time to everything you have made and retain in your memory only what is creative and good. So you can apply judgment meaningfully to your own thinking and start that sorting out process. 7, this is what your right-mindedness cannot but dictate. This is what right-minded thinking does. It keeps only what is real and creative and good. 8, the purpose of time is solely to, quote, give you time to achieve this judgment. And we've talked about that. The purpose of time is to sort all of this out. That's the purpose of the world and our lives, to remember who you are and to remember who everyone and everything around you is as well. 9, it is your own perfect judgment of your own perfect creations. So in the end, it is your own perfect judgment of your own perfect creations. Only love exists. 10, when everything you retain is lovable, there is no reason for fear to remain with you. So where there is love, there can be no fear. 11, this is your part in the atonement. And we've talked about the atonement, that once again is our process of rolling the carpet of time back up through the miracle. Each of us has a unique role to play in the atonement process. And he's telling us that, again, we have a part to play. And this is it. Have your own little last judgment in your mind each day and sort through those thoughts that are worthy of retaining and disregarding the rest. And I would say that that process is expedited by doing the lessons of A Course in Miracles. So I would encourage you, if you haven't done the lessons of the Course, to do them. And if you've done them once, you may want to consider doing them again. I've done the Course a few times, and I find that each time I do it, some of the lessons take on a completely different meaning for me. So if you feel guided to do that, that would expedite that process of sorting out your thinking. Okay, so that's it. We finished chapter 2. Can you believe it? And we're going to move on next week to chapter 3. So thank you for joining me today. If you would like to stay in touch, you can do so through my website, cynthiamorgan.us, or again, on those Facebook pages. Also, we have a telephone number that I mentioned last week, a Google number that's free. It's 707 500 ACIW if you want to leave a message or ask a question there or a comment to share. And of course, I always love hearing from you guys. So thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. And if you would like to say the summary of A Course in Miracles with me, that would be great. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.